Bonjour, je m'appelle Leah Martin et j'ai étudié à Paris pendant 3 mois. Hi, I'm Leah Martin and I studied abroad in Paris, France for 3 months. In this video, I'm going to talk about how studying abroad changed me as a person, and also I'm going to talk about some of the professional and personal skills I gained from my study abroad experience. So for me, the hardest thing about my study abroad experience was not getting used to the cultural differences or even the language differences, but for me it was getting used to living in a giant city because I live in the country and I had never ever lived in a big city or been to a big city for more than one day, and I also had never taken public transportation. I have a car and I drive myself everywhere at home, so it was really hard getting used to figuring out public transportation and figuring out transportation to go to other countries when I wanted to travel, and just being in a giant place with all these people and knowing that I could very easily get lost. So yeah, adjusting to the city was the hardest part for me, and I didn't really realize it at first, but about 2 months in, a little bit after my spring break, well, when I got back from spring break, actually, I realized all of a sudden that I wasn't tense all the time and I wasn't worrying about how I was getting it back. And I realized that I had been doing all those things up until that point. So that was definitely the hardest thing for me. So one of my personal goals that kind of also incorporates into a professional skill I gained in a way, was to become more independent. And I guess the main way I was thinking about achieving that was by traveling, because at home I am pretty independent, but I'm independent like within my own comfort zone and within where I live and where I've grown up. So for me to be independent in another country looked more like traveling places that I hadn't been before and arranging getting ready travel plans and arranging transportation and a place to stay and things to do. So as far as travel goes, during my study abroad experience, I traveled to 6 different countries, including France. And then also I traveled to 3 different places or different areas inside of France other than Paris, as well. So 3 trips I took with my study abroad group, and those trips they organized. With my study abroad group, I went to Belgium, Normandy, and the Loire Valley, which is a region in France where there are a lot of castles. So that's what we did there, is we visited castles, and that was a really neat experience to get to do that. And then on my own, I traveled to Lyon, which is the second biggest city in France, and it's more south than Paris, so it was a little bit warmer. So I went there for weekends. I went to Germany. I traveled to London, England, the Netherlands to visit a friend there, and Ireland as well. I think that's it. Yep, I got all the countries. One of my other goals was to improve my French language skills and abilities, both in speaking French, hearing French, understanding it, writing it, everything. A few ways that I worked towards achieving that goal was, well, first off, just going to France, because just being around people speaking French every day really helped me improve my listening and understanding skills the most. I was just hearing it all the time. And then I stayed with, I had a host mom who would cook some meals for us, and my roommate and I stayed with her. And talking with her helped a lot. Just, she was very patient with us and very understanding, and she would try to make sure that we understood what she was saying. Sometimes she would ask us, like, did you understand this? And sometimes we would, and sometimes we didn't. But I think that the thing that helped me the most to improve my French, was taking 18 hours of classes in French a week at the Catholic Institute of Paris. I took 9 hours of just a general language class where we did a little bit of everything: speaking, writing, reading, listening, grammar, all of that. And then I also had an oral French class, a gastronomy class where we learned about food, and a professional communication class where we learned words having to do with businesses or phrases you would use at different types of jobs. And I took these classes with other non-native students, so other students who were learning French as a second or third or fourth language. Going into my study abroad experience, I would say that I was at a low intermediate level, I guess. I had French before I got there. I'd taken 2 years in high school, and I'd also taken 4 semesters in college. So I was like pretty confident that I would be able to get by, and I was, but it was definitely really hard for me to speak at first. Like when I first got there, I could hardly say anything, and it was so frustrating to me because I had thought that I'd be able to say a lot more, and I knew a lot. I just had a hard time putting sentences together. It took me a while to really see the progress that I had been making in that respect, but by the end of my study abroad, I was communicating pretty well with other people, and I was definitely able to get across what I needed to, and do it like fairly quickly. When I first started, it took me a really long time just to say one thing, and I felt bad because I felt like people were having to wait for me to figure out how to say some stuff, but towards the end, it came a lot more quickly. While in France, I worked to better society by helping local missionaries map out the suburbs of Paris to find the best place to set up a ministry for immigrants. I also volunteered to pick up trash at the Place de Vosges Park, the oldest planned square in Paris. Finally, even though my semester abroad wasn't from a major, I still realized a few things about biology. First thing I realized is that I need plants and nature to be happy. Living in a city where there weren't very many green spaces, like even the parks didn't always have a lot of grass or trees or nature, made me just realize how much I miss plants and how much I need them, and how much I think people in general need them. Secondly, I realized that I know more about biology than I think. Being around non-science majors, for the most part, I realized that I know a lot more about biology than I give myself credit for. The last thing I realized is that ecology is a global field. As I was traveling around a lot, I just kept thinking about how, like, the wind and the water doesn't have borders. There are no borders that stop pollution. Maybe one country has a certain species and it goes extinct, but that could mess things up for everyone because you never know what things you could learn in the future from an animal or a particular plant. So it really kind of made me realize that ecology is really like the world's problem and something that the world as a whole needs to prioritize.